Deadpool and Wolverine marks the 15th X-Men project, and though the X-Men have had some very low lows, the highs are undeniable, paving the way for some of the greatest team-up movies we know and love today. From Deadpool to First Class, X2 to Dark Phoenix, today I want to sit down to rank every single X-Men movie from the worst to the best, and the tiers we have on screen today are bad, meh, good, great, and best of the best. And before we get into it, let me know your ranking of all of the X-Men projects in the comments down below, and over 98% of you guys who watch these videos aren't yet subscribed, so if you don't want to miss out on any more rankings or reviews, hit that button. Both always need more time. Let's get into it. We're going to be going in release order, starting it off with the original X-Men. I think this movie is really interesting, but I think it's just a good film. I don't think it does anything super over the top amazing, but it completely suffices as an origin story for a team. You know, we got Wolverine solo movies later down the line, and I don't even necessarily think having a Wolverine movie before this would have done this movie any good. Next up, we have X2. This one's gonna go in great. I think this is universally known as just a great superhero team-up movie. It more so is definitely a Wolverine-focused film, and that's really what a lot of the original X-Men films are. I'm personally not mad at that. I know a lot of people that don't necessarily like that aspect of it, but I also feel like all the side characters are good enough. For me personally, I think the castings themselves really shine in X2 rather than X-Men The Last Stand or the original X-Men. But speaking of X-Men The Last Stand, I think that's gonna go in meh. Personally, I don't actually think the final fight is that bad. I really like how grandiose it gets. I really like how epic it feels. Genuinely, it feels more epic than X-Men and X2. But I think the pacing of this movie is nearly horrendous. It's not that I think it's miles worse than the original X-Men movie, but it doesn't do anything super new and super different. And then we have X-Men Origins Wolverine. I recently rewatched this one, and I think it's actually really, really good. I don't know if it goes above X-Men per se, because I feel like just in general, X-Men as a premise, you know, early 2000s, superhero team-up movie with no prior films is a lot more ballsy. But X-Men Origins Wolverine is a really unique origin story. Normally, I feel like origin stories in the first half, or just say like 50 to 40 minutes of the film, aren't really that interesting for an overall story perspective. We get a lot of great character backstory, but again, overall story feels like it lacks. Here, that's not the case at all whatsoever. The overall story is super compelling and super interesting because he's already a mutant from the beginning. And then, once the adamantium is put into him, that's when the story really progresses and keeps on going, which I absolutely love. I think the villainous ideas get a little bit convoluted by the end, but I think the twists and turns are completely fine. And hot take, I don't think Deadpool is the worst thing ever in this film. Obviously, it's miles better in the actual like modern films, but I do think it's at least an interesting take on Deadpool. I don't like the fact that his mouth is covered, but the action with him is so cool, and he's a really interesting villainous aspect of this film. And then we have X-Men First Class. This one is gonna go at the top of great with potential to go up into best of the best. I recently rewatched this movie when I was watching movies for 24 hours straight, and I absolutely loved my time with this film, no matter how bad of a day I was having overall. X-Men First Class not only reinvents the wheel in terms of big scale superhero films, but in my opinion, it does an amazing modern take on the X-Men. I think it doesn't shy away from the political elements, which I absolutely love. I think Days of the Future Past has a lot to thank for X-Men First Class, just because so much of these base characters are so well introduced in this film, and it just doesn't get better than this. And I feel like also the castings are just perfect all across the board, which only elevates this movie. And then we have the Wolverine. I'm going to put this at the top of good, but I will note, I don't remember the most about this film. I've only seen this film once, and it was originally when I watched all the X movies for the first time about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago at this point. I really do enjoy this movie, and I do think it is easily better than X-Men and X-Men Origins Wolverine, but I think the final act is kind of just stupid and weird. I mean, we have such amazing grounded action. They get to this big robot battle by the end. That was just really annoying. But overall, James Mangold has the sauce, and it just felt like this was kind of him trying to get the focus. And then in Logan, he completely gets on focus and he's doing whatever the hell he wants, which I absolutely love. And then we have X-Men Days of the Future Past. This is going in best of the best, and I can't believe I'm about to say this on my YouTube channel because I don't think I've ever made this statement public, but this is like a better and more interesting version of Avengers Endgame. That's a little bit of a clickbaity statement, but I do think this time travel idea was executed so much better in X-Men Days of the Future Past than it was in Endgame. That's not to shit on Endgame. If you want to check out my MCU ranking, I did one including Deadpool and Wolverine last week, so go check that out. It is also obvious Days of the Future Past didn't have nearly as many stakes as Endgame, but to this movie specifically, I absolutely adore the way that they clash these universes and the way that they bring everything together. And I love that Wolverine is our central character that goes between the future and the past. And this is truly the perfect way to culminate the universe. Honestly, I wish all of the main X-Men movies ended after this, and then we got like the Old Man Logan story like far after. I feel like that would have been way more interesting. I love all of the character work in this film. Magneto is so perfect in this movie. Probably one of my favorite iterations of the character in general. I love the way that they have this like a super recluse Charles Xavier. That's super interesting. And then again, you get the perfect mix of amazing castings, amazing chemistry, and an amazing story overall. This is how you do a time travel story while focusing on the two versions of the timeline. I absolutely love this film, and honestly, one of the best X-Men films in general, one of the best comic book movies ever made. And then we get to Deadpool, and this is also one of the best comic book movies ever made. This is going to go under X-Men Days of the Future Past, though. I used to think Deadpool was easily like the best X-Men movie, but as I've gotten older, I think the pace of the movie is a little weird. Like, the storytelling is interesting. It's a really cool way to handle it, but I think it just drags a little bit in the middle act. And then also, what I was saying good about X-Men Origins Wolverine is like the beginning is super, super interesting, even though he's not the character yet. I feel like the beginning does drag just a tad bit in Deadpool, but the humor is so fun. I will always love the humor. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't care that it's for 13-year-olds. I'm always going to be laughing at it. And after seeing Deadpool and Wolverine, I can confidently say I'll never get tired of this Ryan Reynolds shtick of playing Deadpool. I absolutely love it. And this movie was game-changing for just comic movies in general. Easily goes in best of the best. And then we have X-Men Apocalypse. This one is going to go in bad. The first of a few bad movies in the X-Men franchise. The only highlight of this film, or two highlights of this film. Overall, the cast in the X-Men is still as interesting as ever, and I think no matter what the movie is, even in the absolute worst X-Men movie, the cast is at least interesting inherently because mutants are very, very interesting. But aside from that, and the fact that Oscar Isaac is in this movie, which is really, really cool, and I think his performance is at least interesting, this movie literally delivers jack shit. Next up, we have Logan. This is going to go in best of the best. This is pretty much a 5-star movie for me, like a 9.5 out of 10. Rewatched this right before watching Deadpool and Wolverine, and I absolutely love Logan. I don't see how someone can not like this movie. It's the perfect culmination of what comic book movies can be. I'm not saying all comic book movies need to be this. Like, you're looking at Days of the Future Past right behind this, and then Deadpool. Like, these are three significantly different movies on three completely different scales of a type of comic book film. And I absolutely love what each of these movies do individually. Logan specifically focuses on a character study. I think all of the characters are amazing. X-23 is such a great inclusion, and the final moments never fail to rip my heart out. I absolutely love this film. A generational one. I've seen it once, like when I originally watched it. Then I got to watch it in black and white, which was super cool. And then obviously I recently rewatched this, and never gets old. Next up, we have Deadpool 2. This was going to go at the very, very top of great. I can't put it in best of the best just because I'm saving one more movie for that spot, but I think Deadpool 2 is really, really fun. It's super unique even after seeing Deadpool. I think the humor is obviously a little bit recyclable. You know, you have that same tone and same sense of humor, which is just the Ryan Reynolds Deadpool, but I think this adds so many cool characters to the X-Men Deadpool world. Cable is one of my favorite comic book villains. He is so amazing in this film. And I also just love the way in general that this movie is able to balance having a bunch of just different levels and different types of antagonists. There's not one set villain. They're just fighting against a threat. I think the introduction of Domino, I believe her name is so cool. X-Force is also so funny, and just overall, is that through line of heart while still elevating on all of the comedy in the first film. Absolute banger film. Next up, we have Dark Phoenix. This one's going to go in bad. Below X-Men Apocalypse, just because I saw Dark Phoenix in theaters, and the fact that I wasted like $13 on a ticket makes me hate it even more. I don't really like this movie. Again, anytime Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy are playing Magneto and Professor X, it's gonna be interesting. Like, you can't not make that interesting. And then they somehow make it not interesting with, I think the lady's name is Sophie Turner, and then all these other things. It's just, it doesn't really work. And then we have New Mutants. This one's also gonna go in bad, but I will not put it as the worst X-Men movie. The New Mutants is at least interesting conceptually. I just never really gave a shit about the Dark Phoenix storyline, and so that was inherently just I don't really care about this movie, but I'm watching it anyway, and yes, it's still dog shit. But the New Mutants at least has an interesting concept. I was following the production of this movie pretty closely because I believe I was in like 8th going into 9th grade whenever all of the stuff was happening with this. Obviously, there was the merger as well with Fox and Disney, which put this movie on the back burner, and I was super excited for it. I really hadn't seen much of like X-Men movies aside from Deadpool stuff at that point, and so the New Mutants was a super interesting concept to me, and it completely failed on all fronts. I cannot believe this is on Anya Taylor-Joy's filmography. This movie's not good, man, and there's not much else to it. And then we have X-Men 97. Now, you might be wondering, why the hell is X-Men 97 on this if it's technically an MCU project? I thought, since I'm including Deadpool and Wolverine, and I genuinely really like X-Men 97, and it's a recent Marvel project, why not include it? I'm going to put X-Men 97 at the top of great. Actually, you know, I'm going to put it below Deadpool 2. Now, I think X-Men 97 is super interesting, especially as someone who hasn't seen the original X-Men 97 show. And so this series, I think, characterizes these characters in such a easy to consume way. And I mean that in a really good way. That's not a negative, because it truly made me care about this X-Men as a team. Whereas even in the X-Men live action movies, early 2000s, 2010s, whatever it may be, I still viewed them as individual characters. The chemistry in X-Men 97 is literally palpable. It also made me fall in love with the character of Gambit and Storm and Jean. I mean, literally, X-Men 97 was truly my gateway into loving the X-Men as a team. And I'll never forget that. I did a review for this show as well, so check that out if you haven't already. But X-Men 97 is so awesome, and I absolutely love it. But finally, we have the newly released Deadpool and Wolverine. This is going to go in best of the best. And honestly, I think it's going to go above X-Men Days of the Future Past. Now, as of now, I've only seen the movie one time, and so this could change in the future, but not only do I think that this movie uses like timelines, the TVA, multiverses, universes, I think it uses it in a slightly more creative way than X-Men Days of the Future Past, but I also think it's because this movie has so much more to work with than X-Men Days of the Future Past. I think this is better than Deadpool just because it uses what the previous two Deadpool movies did and just elevates it more and more. You can check out my full review for Deadpool and Wolverine as well as my ranking for all the MCU movies. Those are already uploaded on the channel, and I talk more about this movie there, but nothing can beat out Logan, to be honest with you. I will say, on the good side of Deadpool and Wolverine, the continuation of Hugh Jackman's adaptation of Wolverine is absolutely awesome. Deadpool's character still has an emotional core, but is still the same Ryan Reynolds shtick that I absolutely love about him. As I mentioned before, there are writing problems. There's an overall messy storyline going on, but it is a lot of smaller scenes that have a nice little through line to make an epic and grand story. But that wraps up my ranking for all of the X-Men movies. Again, let me know your ranking in the comments down below, as well as your thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.